Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And we're getting dangerously close to BatCats season, folks. So we decided that, it'd be a great idea to have the voice of not only the BatCats, but pretty much every non-revenue sport at K-State, does the play-by-play for all of them, does amazing work with it. You know him, probably. You love him. Well, if you're listening to this, you know him. And that is the voice of K-State on the radio for multiple sports, but most notably known for his non-revenue work, and that is Brian Smoller. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yep. Figured, like we said, who better to talk about the BatCats than the guy who, follows them pretty much everywhere they go, has had some really, really amazing calls. I think you were on the call where, I think it was one of the Oklahoma schools where Tyson Neighbors touched the 100 mark. I think you were on call for that.
Yeah, pretty amazing. And, he did it a couple of different times, but there's been a lot of moments. And last year certainly was a year where there were a lot of those times where Matt Walters, who also does the games, and we've been partnering together for I think it's our 26th year this year going into this season. There are a lot of times we're pinching ourselves. We're like, hey, you remember this reminds me so much of this time, or you remember when we did this together? And there was a lot of reflecting last year as K-State kind of made it back to the promised land in the super regional. Yeah.
And that was such a fun team to watch too, for a myriad of reasons. And this team is it's similar in some ways and different in a lot of other ways. But before we really get into that, we kind of wanted to make a little sandwich of warm-up questions. But I think that this quietly is the most important question of the show, and that is, what is your ultimate ballpark food? Are you like a classic hot dog guy, or are you one of the chicken tender people that really like the chicken tenders at the ballpark? Or
I am not. I am not as much of a lover of ballpark food as Chili Dog Matt Walters, my partner, is. I can speak. There have been many a road trip where he has brought something into the booth. You're like, what is that? Why are you eating that? And then inevitably he'll complain about his gut in about 2 hours after the game from eating whatever it is that he ate. But so it's usually him that's usually eating the stuff that's very odd at a ballpark. I will say this. The ballpark in Arlington for the Big 12 championship has always had, just like they do in Kansas City for basketball, they have themed foods for each school. And K-State's here a couple of years ago, I don't know if they did it last year, but K-State's was a pulled pork taco that had like this purple cabbage on it. And man, it was delicious. It was really good. And I hope they bring that back, because that was, I don't know if tacos are necessarily the thing that you would put in line with Kansas or Kansas State, but it was delicious. That was the best thing I've ever had at a ballpark, covering K-State baseball anyway.
Yeah, it has to be better than the whatever it was for the Big 12 tournament 2 or 3 years ago, where it was the hot dog, it was the bacon wrapped hot dog with the.
Not good. That was not good from the get-go. I don't know who dreamed up that one. I know their intent was good and pure, but the picture of it alone, once you saw it, you were like, this is a terrible idea. This is a terrible idea and should never have passed the green light from somebody.
Who approved this?
Yeah, right.
But now we can get more into actually talking about this year's team. And I think Connor can speak a lot to, sort of the quality of last year's team, and just basically the next question, basically.
Yeah. So maybe the biggest story getting into this season is that we are losing a lot of star power from last year. I mean, the obvious name is going to be Kalen Culpepper, because I mean he was just a force for K-State, particularly down the stretch. But you also will have guys like Brendan Jones and Tyson Neighbors as well, and that's just a few off the top of my head. But what that does do is it opens spaces for new faces and transfers, particularly in the current age of college athletics. Transfers are starting to become the name of the game. But between the transfers and guys already on the roster, who do you think are some people that are set to step up into some big time roles this year for K-State?
Well, it's a good question, and it's one that I'm sure the coaches are also wanted to know immediately after the season, and that's part of your planning. You go into it. I think K-State as a whole, as a program, their philosophy is going to be one where they're going to really build around a core group of guys and add portal, maybe more than you see on the women's basketball side, certainly, but similar to what you see on football. You build a core of group through freshmen and you have them develop over time, and then you add some really key pieces to fill in. And I think they did that for the most part with the portal this year, is they went and got some impact bats and some defensive guys that they can plug in right away. And what I think they've done is made the team deeper than they were a year ago. You talk about Culpepper and Jones, but at the end of the season, it kind of got to a point where those two guys were doing a lot of heavy lifting for them in the postseason. And what you hope now is, to your point, that a guy like Nick English and a Kine Lotus and even David Bishop, who's been around the block a little bit at TCU and now here at K-State, but those guys become your core and they take the next step forward and become the guys that are going to carry it. I think Lotus is a guy that has the bat talent, no doubt, to be a guy that could be a top of the order hitter and be in the Big 12 race for hitting. But he's got to go out and do it. And now the focus is going to be on him. Same with Nick English. He showed already from the first 2 years of him playing that he's been a guy that's going to be an impact bat for K-State. But beyond those guys, there's going to be some others that had good summers that could factor in. I'm thinking of the center fielder for K-State, Caden Carl. He's a guy that could possibly emerge. He had a really good summer. We'll talk later about some freshmen, I'm sure, that it could impact the bat. But right off the top of my head, you're thinking about the guys who are going to take over on the left side of the infield at shortstop, third base, and second base. They brought in some really key guys that they're going to have to do at this level, the Big 12, and against some really good competition. But their numbers, even at the lower levels and against some good competition when they played there, a Bear Madillac and O'Connor, some of these guys at catcher, I think they'll be able to jump in there and provide K-State a little bit of a lift.
And I think that's really important what you said about that whole left side of the infield, because pretty much before the season started, while the portal was ramping up, Connor and I had a lot of conversations of, like the only spot that has a guaranteed, like that is a known commodity is first base. David Bishop's probably going to take first. And then Nick English was probably going to take one of the corner outfield spots. Now it sounds like Caden Carl is going to take center. I feel like everything else was just so wide open. But then you get transfers like D. Kennedy, Shintaro Inoue, and I everything just sort of started coming together. But it also looks like a roster that's just sort of rife with competition, even among the transfers that they brought in. So I think it is really important, like you said, that they have those older guys to build that culture. But this isn't on the outline, but did you sort of have that same feeling of like, I'm just curious how the lineup is going to sort of shake out?
Yeah, no, I had the same thought. I mean, obviously, when you get to the end, you're trying to enjoy the moment of the super regional. But as you go into the game two of that, and you're up against it, and things are not going well, that's when you begin to evaluate for next year and start to think, okay, well, what can you use from this? What's the positive of this? How do you get the bounce? And the cautionary tale, of course, is the 2014 baseball season where, in 13, K-State goes to a super and hosted a regional here and won the Big 12, and they brought everybody back. I mean, they lost virtually no one from that 2013 team and completely bombed in 2014. And that team will tell you, they took it for granted that they were just going to duplicate what they had last year. And I don't want to say they got complacent, but I don't know that they put in as much work as they thought they put in a lot of work. In the end, looking back on it, as we have had reunion since, they said they didn't put in the work they knew they needed to get it done. So to your point, I think bringing in competition, bringing in guys that are hungry to prove themselves, like a D. Kennedy, who's a highly talented kid that just didn't get a shot at Texas, but performed well here at this ballpark against K-State last time he played. I think that helps. A Maximus Martin who comes in that, wants to prove that he can do it at this level and follow in the footsteps of Kalen Culpepper. Same for Dante Lewis and Shintari or Shintaro and Inoue and all those guys that want to show everybody, put a chip on their shoulder that, hey, I'm going to be the next guy. I think that's healthy for the program. I think and being around them in the fall, a couple of times going over there, I get the same vibe from the coaching staff that we had going into last year, which was we're going to surprise some people. We're going to be better than people think, and it may take a minute. It may take a minute to get there because of the schedule, but you almost have to treat this K-State team, and I would tell the fans the same thing. You got to treat it almost like it's a group of 5 basketball season where, you play those mid-majors in basketball, and early in the year, they're just taking their licks, right? They're taking those money games and they're just getting beat in. But all that matters for them is conference and then winning their conference tournament. I don't think baseball is necessarily in that same boat, but they're going out and playing all these tough opponents early to make sure that their RPI is protected so that when they do figure it out and they can get to 30 wins during the conference season, all of a sudden they're in the postseason because their RPI is so high. And so they're going to take some losses here early that people are going to be like, oh, they stink. Don't write them off. Don't write them off. It'll take a minute to get there, but when they do, they'll be rolling.
Yeah, I remember 2 things. Firstly, I think it was in the Big 12 championship tournament that I think D. Kennedy, didn't he take Owen Borman deep? I seem to remember that happening.
Yes.
So he finally ends up here, and we'll also talk about RPI in a bit. But another part of the story is not only the transfers, but the really highly touted young guys that are coming in. People like AJ Avasco, Dante Lewis, and those are guys that I also think just, based on recruiting pedigree, what do I know? But they are going to try and push for playing time in a way that we saw very similarly to Nick English last year. So do you expect a lot of time for those highly touted young guys to sort of start forming that next core of true freshmen that to sort of keep building that culture?
Well, it depends on what you mean by a lot of time. I don't know that they have the room with the roster constructed the way it is. I'm not sure that there will be a replication of a guy that's in there every day at one spot, these freshmen or even the newcomers. I think they're going to be a little more platoon this year just based on matchups. You got a nice breakdown of left and right bats. I mentioned Vasco. The kid's a monster. I mean, he's huge, runs like the wind. And so he's a natural fit for the outfield, but I don't know that he would necessarily play every day. I mean, you still have Lotus, you have English, mentioned Carl, you want to get Lewis in there. They have other people that can play O'Connor can play the outfield, a catcher. I think if you have Madliak catching, then it makes sense that you would put O'Connor somewhere and you got to get maybe potentially his bat in the lineup. So it's going to provide. Will they get to play? Yes. You look back at some of these guys that Brendan Jones is a perfect example. He didn't play a whole lot as a freshman, but made the most of his opportunities and then earned himself a starting spot as a sophomore. So I think Abasco, Lewis, the rest of these guys, they're highly touted, but let's remember that they're not finished products. They're coming here to develop. And while they're good, and in some cases come in better prospects than the guys they're replacing, they are not walking on campus at the same level of Brendan Jones or Kalen Culpepper. And sometimes we as fans have a hard time remembering that. We want we see Dante Lewis out there and we hear about all the buzz on this guy, or Maximus, coming in, and you hear about all the buzz and you want him to be the guy as Kalen Culpepper. Well, Kalen Culpepper is, the number 3 prospect in the Minnesota Twins organization. It's not going to be that, but I am too excited about these guys. Watching them in the fall, there's definite talent. The moment's not too big for them. I think that's one of the things that excites you the most. Is I'm really curious to see how they handle this first 3 weeks of the season where K-State is playing some tremendous opponents, because so far they have carried themselves with not arrogance but great confidence, and I think that's all you need, that as a ball player as you go through ups and downs.
Yeah, that's
I do want to step in here real quick, Ace, with a question that's not on the outline, or maybe a bit more of a statement, and just get your read on it. because of some things that you've mentioned about the makeup of this team. Earlier you mentioned that they really have a chip on the shoulder mentality, and then just now you were talking about how they carry themselves with a real confidence. And it sounds like despite losing a pretty key core from this team, that this is still a very vintage Pete Hughes squad in terms of their composition as a culture, where they do have that chip on their shoulder, and they are a very confident ball club. Is that how you would? You said that before, but is that an accurate assessment?
No, I think it is. I think the talent level is what gives them that confidence, and then also getting to that super regional did so much. I think to listen. Success in sports is about trust. There has to be a trust level between student athletes and coach. And in this day of the portal and this day of where we're at in college athletics, I think that's never been more important. Is that you have to have a great amount of trust in the guy next to you, and then also guy or gal, I suppose, and then also with the people that are leading your team, both from a player standpoint and also from a head coach perspective. It gives a lot more, not that there wasn't before, but I think there gives a lot more power behind the statements that Pete Hughes makes when you are coming off a season like you had last year. I think it has weight because it works. It clearly works. They clearly worked last year. Whatever the buttons he's pushing work. So if you're a player coming in, you want to be a part of that. You're willing to buy. Your buy-in is high, if that makes sense. And the talent level on the pitching staff, the talent level at the plate is great. Now, being able to get it all fit together, that's the part you got to figure out in a short amount of time, and you're already kind of at a disadvantage being here where we are with 18 inches of snow. That was the only good thing about the snow than the last few days in the South, was that maybe it kind of helped slow down the readiness of those other baseball teams. Like they get a little bit of what it's like up here in the North, where we got freezing conditions and snow on the ground outside.
Yeah, and also to sort of touch on it, that you mentioned the talent on the pitching staff, that at least in the bullpen, that sort of core remained mostly intact with guys like Blake Dean, JJ Slack, Andrew Evans for more of that long relief role. Same with Mason Buss, Cole Weisenbaker, Adam Arthur. So do you think it would be sort of that same rotation for at least for the bullpen that we saw last year? Obviously Sands, Tyson Neighbors, and probably Slack in the closer role.
Yeah, I think JJ would move he'd be the first option in the closer role. They have other options there, but he would be the first up just based on what he did at the end of last season. I think the only bad news there is the only injury on the team is Colt Weisenbaker, who is out for the year with Tommy John surgery. So that really stinks for him and for the team. He was obviously the first. He had kind of put himself in that role, the first guy out of the pen, and had really come on with that side arming lefty stuff. So disappointing. It probably means more of a role for Adam Arthur in that kind of same arm slot and perspective. I would think one name that I would add to the bullpen mix would be James Guyette, who really worked with Rudy Darrow and changed his arm slot at the end of last season. And we saw in the regional in Virginia, or the super regional in Virginia, he came in for an inning and was just dominant. And I think they figured something out with him. And he's had a fantastic fall, had a fantastic summer. I think doubled up strikeouts to innings pitched in his summer ball league. So I think that's a name that could surprise for K-State out of the pen. And I think Blake Dean will have a shot at starting. I think they may move him out of the pen and give him a chance at the rotation with all the arms they have there coming in. So, but yeah, the other guys you mentioned, that's definitely an advantage there. And whoever doesn't win a rotation spot, be it Dean or Ty Rule or whoever else, then you have them as an option out of the bullpen as well. And Mason's younger brother, Nolan Buss, I know as a freshman, they're pretty high on, and there's some JUCO arms that they've brought in that they're pretty excited about. That's not even to mention the two big guys that they brought in to help out on the weekend, and that's Carson Leggett and Michael Quevedo. Both will probably be Saturday or weekend starters for K-State.
That's really encouraging to hear, especially because first off, we didn't know that Borima had a year of eligibility left last year, so we thought he was gone. So then we hear that he's coming back. It's like, oh, well, that makes us feel a lot better. But yeah, I also have to work in every single time that just randomly Adam Arthur bringing up that he likes roller coasters in response to you. That became one of our favorite bits for like the entire year. But
he
Connor,
is a different duck, that is for sure.
well, you have to be when you're left-handed pitchers are just strange in a good way. They're just strange people. But
Very
Connor,
true.
you have the next question there.
Yeah, we've touched on this a bit here already, but Pete Hughes has kind of gotten a knack for, or at least reputation for, these last couple years of putting together some really challenging non-conference slates. And this season, he's really doubling down. After last season, it really paid off towards the end. But it's going to be a long road trip to start the season. I think like almost a dozen games. So what are the expectations going into this trip? You mentioned platooning earlier. We're going to see a lot of different faces and names out there, or I don't know. What are you expecting from this trip?
I think, well, it's two things, right? You want to win as many of those games as you can, for sure. And I don't think if you had Pete on, he wouldn't say they're going into, treat them as spring training games or any of that. Not that that's what you're suggesting, but I'm just saying that they're not going in there. It's a dual purpose, no doubt. They have to figure things out, and there are some things you won't know until the lights are on. I mean, I think he had a quote about Dante Lewis in the story that D. Scott Fritchen wrote up on him about how everything points to this kid being a great superstar in years to come. But you still have to turn the lights on. You never know until the lights are on and the pressure's on. How do they handle it? Caitlin Culpepper, I remember as a freshman, it only took a couple of games before you were like, yeah, this guy's going to be a superstar. And I remember telling everybody his freshman year, like, this kid is amazing. He will be amazing for K-State. And now, to his credit, he went out and did it. But the talent was there. We'll see if it's the same for these other guys. I mean, you have to see them in a game. Now, they're going to play 5 ranked teams in that first 3 weeks, and 4 of them come in the last 2 weeks of that stretch. Coastal Carolina's not ranked right now, but they're a perennial power. Obviously won the national title there a couple years ago, and then Washington's a pretty good team in the Big Ten now, and St. Joe, that'll be a game that is winnable, but certainly an East Coast team that had some success in the past. And then I'll be in Arlington with them, join them up there when they play the rematch with Arkansas, and go through that tournament with Michigan, who is on the rise and feel like they're going to be better than they were a year ago. And then TCU, who they don't play this year in the Big 12, but play in that tournament. And then in Frisco, the week after, they'll get LSU, who's ranked, and Nebraska is supposed to have a breakout season, and they're ranked. So, and Sam Houston, who K-State played before and has lost to. So, I don't know. I would imagine they're going to put in quite a bit of different lineups late in games to try and see how guys perform, but they'll do what they can to win, because just 1 or 2 wins in that stretch against the right team can make the whole effort worth it. Playing 6th ranked North Carolina in a midweek game during the first week is not a throwaway game. It's not just, hey, let's show up and get shellacked. They're going to do what they can to win it, because if you win it, then that's a thing that you will carry you the rest of the year as far as your RPI.
And I think you mentioned it earlier, but this is something that even with all of the Pete Hughes squads in the past, I remember it was 2 or 3 years ago, like the first game of the year was up against LSU and Paul Skeens. And I just remember there was no fear on that team. And I think that sort of speaks to their confidence. Now, that was also the year that K-State got RPI'd, and that's exactly how Connor and I have described it for the past few years. And I think that this is a conscious effort to increase your RPI so you have that better chance of getting into the tournament. But it's exactly what you said. They're not doing it just to raise their RPI. This team has the confidence where, they think that they can go out and beat anybody. And on a good day, I think that that's the talent level of this team. It's just so many moving pieces that in a lot of ways it's like this year's football team, where you have a lot of young guys and you kind of are expecting up and downs, and it's baseball. So I how do you? I mean, obviously, this is a Pete Hughes question, but how do you think that he's going to go and sort of try and treat the volatility that comes with having such a young team?
One thing that's great about Pete is that he's pretty much the same each day and doesn't get too high or too low. And you need that in baseball. It's always positive, always looking for the positives, always trying to talk about the positives. I will tell you that was one thing that even calling games that we had to change, Matt and I, instead of always thinking the what if in the negative sense, like, man, what's if this happens and this is going to happen and this is going to happen and we've seen this story before, on and on and on. It was a change of thinking of what ifs were now. What if this happens, then this would happen, then this might happen, and then this will positively happen. And it takes a minute to try and get in that positive frame mind. And I think when he speaks about culture and he speaks about the confidence of the team, that's what he's talking about, is that there's an expectation of that team that things are going to work out the right way. And so it's different than always thinking the worst. You can't go to the plate, you can't go to the mound worried about what may happen if I throw the wrong pitch or if I swing at the wrong pitch. You can't, it's just not successful. So they work a lot on self-confidence, manifesting those things, persevering through the tough times and staying even and staying on the scout. And you can trust the prep that they do. And this is another side shout out as well to their staff, not just Austin Waits and Rudy Darrell, but everybody top down as unified a staff as we have here at K-State. They are all on the same page of what they're trying to do and how they go about in scouting and the analytics and marrying analytics with the emotional side of things. And I think that's what gives this team an edge to go into those games with great confidence. You said it before, Ace, and that is you don't get RPI points for just showing up. You have to actually win the game. Like if they just wanted to schedule games and get their brains beat in over 3 weeks and hope that helps them out at the end of the year, well, they would schedule LSU. They'd be all SEC teams, right? The top SEC teams in the country. That's not what they're doing. They are systematically trying to find a way to get wins while they do that and play these tough teams away from Manhattan to be able to get an RPI boost. But their goal is not to just show up and see what they have and wait till the end of the year. No, it's more they got to get it. They got to get some wins in this first part of the year. They're capable of doing it, and I think it's because of that belief system and trust factor that we talked about before.
And I'll let Connor take the last question on the outline, but this is one that's one of your colleagues, Mitch Fortner, has always done like a My Guy kind of segment, specifically with football. And Connor and I have gone on record for who our guys are. Mine is Shintaro Inoue, and Connor is...
I actually do not remember who I picked for mine, but...
It was Nick English.
That was Nick English. All right. I believe you. I've been very sick the last few days, so my head is all over the place.
So who do you think is going to be your guy this upcoming year?
I'm going to go with Blake Dean, kind of a safe pick, but I think he's ready for the next step forward. I think he learned a lot in both starting and also coming out of the pen and at times taking over that closer role for Tyson when Tyson was out. I think he, as a freshman, handled himself very well and has only gotten better since then. I think he is poised to really take a next step forward and be a good leader on this team, on the pitching staff, and be a guy that they can really rely on. So I'll go with Blake Dean on the mound. But the two guys you mentioned are really good picks, really solid picks, and they need to be, no one's asking them to go out and hit 390 and hit 20 home runs. K-State's not asking those guys to do that. They just go out there, be yourself, get going, be confident, and let the next guy up go get hits. Because that's one thing this team will have is they're not relying on a Culpepper 3-run home run each time up. Not that last year, but that's what it kind of became in the postseason. This team will have the depth to be able to, hey, let's go get a situational hit here or a double or a triple, and they got guys up and down the lineup that can do it. So I'm excited to see him get going here in a couple of weeks.
So more Jaden Parsons, maybe a little less Kalen Culpepper.
There are guys that can hit home runs. I'm just not sure that it have to be up to one guy each night, is what I'm saying. And and biding your time to get the next. When's the next time this Culpepper kid's out of the bat to be able to get a big hit? I think there's multiple guys that can have at any point in time of the season a hot streak and carry this team.
Jaden Parsons last year just kind of became a folk hero towards the back end of the year.
And he's on staff. Like, they kept him, and he's one of the graduate assistants now for K-State. So he's still around. So maybe some of that Jaden Parsons magic can wear off a little bit on some of the other guys.
And Connor, you got the last question here.
Yeah, we'll close out with another, well, I don't want to call it an easy one. This could actually end up being pretty controversial. But, I mean, it's your opinion. What is the best baseball movie that's ever been made?
Oh, boy. Well, a lot of people are going to go with Field of Dreams. I'll actually go with the one that I remember that I watched. The earliest one that I watched that I remember as a kid that I just thought was just so cool as a baseball movie, and that was The Natural. So I always go back to The Natural. If I see it on, I'm always watching it. There's just so many great one-liners in it. Wilford Brimley cracks me up every time. Michael Madsen, who plays like one of the outfielders, and he comes in, Bump Bailey, I think that was his name, and he comes in from the outfield, and he talks about how he dropped the fly ball he drops. He says because the sun was in his eyes and it's like a perfectly cloudy day. And Wilford Brimley looks up and goes, "Yeah, blinding." Like, it's just a great delivery. Makes me laugh every time. And the music and everything else. So I'll go with The Natural. That may be controversial for some, but I like pretty much any baseball movie. If it's on, I'll watch them, even if they're more modern these days.
Yeah. Not to hop in, but I mean, my personal favorite is probably The Sandlot, which is a baseball movie, kinda, but we count those.
Yeah, I get a lot of, because the announcer in that movie is Smalls, right? So I get a lot of that from the baseball team or others around baseball season, right? When they start yelling at me or whatever else to hurry up, whatever, that's Smalls, not Smoles, instead of referencing The Sandlot. But that's one that gets brought up a lot. Moneyball's another one that has an appeal that I didn't like it the first time I saw it, but like, it's on all the time. But if it's on, I'll watch it. And I don't know, just something about baseball movies. You always seem to find your way to them once they're on.
How could you not be romantic about baseball? But yeah, that's pretty much all the questions that we had for you. Do you want to plug anything on the way out? Of course, you have the great women's basketball team, although they unfortunately just lost Yoki for the short term, which my heart breaks every single time that happens, but it just keeps happening, which is really sad. But feel free to plug anything that you got going on.
All I'll say is that I get to work specifically with those two sports. I get to work with two coaches that are great and like each other and respect each other as well, and often trade texts. Jeff Mitty is a huge baseball guy. He's a big college baseball guy. He played college baseball, so he's always one that's asking about baseball and comes to the games, and the other way around as well. Coach Hughes just sent me a picture the other day of him in his Aoka Lee jersey watching the women's game. He's a huge women's basketball fan, loves Aoka Lee and the team. They've had them out to throw out the first pitch a couple of times. So really enjoy those two teams. They're fun to watch, great family events. So if you're thinking about this spring and whether or not it's worth coming out to the ballpark to watch K-State baseball, I would say do it for sure. There's only 23 home games this year. The cost is pretty low to get a ticket and get in the door. A lot of great promotions, and you will enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. All the great things of the college game, college spirit, and then, of course, the great sport of baseball mixed in there as well. It can make for some fun afternoons and evenings at Toynton Family Stadium.
And there have been a few times at Toynton where it's gotten quietly, like, I don't want to say quietly because that's kind of the wrong word to use, but it's gotten electric in Toynton a few times. I mean, even with, of course, the Woo, which was that a Pete Hughes thing or was that a Tyson Neighbors thing?
I don't know where that got started from. I don't know how it got started, but I love it. I love it every time it goes.
Yeah. But as always, support all the non-rev sports, and thank you for Brian for taking the time out of his day to drop on by. You can follow him on Twitter at Brian Smoller. And of course, you'll hear his voice every single time that you listen to, well, not every single time, but most of the time when you're listening to the Non-Revenue Sports. But thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email us, we're AggieVilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I am at ACEdwards00.
I'm at Connor Boutsor, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store. Link found in our podcast and Twitter bio. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.